Princess Anne had spent a lifetime mastering the discipline of silence, but one sentence from the judge stripped that discipline away. Inside a sealed London courtroom, the royal family learned that Meghan had secretly retained a collection of Prince Philip's restricted files, documents he had ordered removed from private circulation before his death. Anne did not argue. She did not rise. She simply gripped the edge of the table as the truth reached her. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The hearing began after royal archivists found missing reference numbers in a restricted catalog linked to Philip's letters, security briefings, and handwritten family instructions. A restricted catalog is a protected record showing which sensitive documents exist, where they belong, and who may handle them. Its broken sequence proved the gap was deliberate, not clerical. The judge then delivered the ruling. Meghan had concealed and retained 12 forbidden files from Philip's protected archive, keeping them outside authorized royal custody for years. Anne heard her father's name spoken beside the phrase unauthorized concealment, and something in her tightened. She lowered her eyes, not from weakness, but because the chamber felt exposed. Across the room, Meghan remained still, yet the princess read that composure as something colder than control. To her, this was not a dispute over ownership. It was a violation of the final boundary her father had drawn before death, and Philip had trusted the family to protect his private judgment from becoming ammunition. The court deepened the wound when a recovered inventory page entered the documented record. 3 files carried Philip's handwritten warning, not for household circulation under any circumstance. The judge refused to summarize their contents in open session, explaining only that they concerned unresolved family disputes, private assessments of royal conduct, and one sealed recommendation tied to the future stability of the crown. That recommendation mattered because it could shape how the monarchy responded when family loyalty collided with institutional survival. Anne placed her father's fountain pen on the table. Her hand trembled once. William saw it, reached toward his aunt, then stopped when she shook her head. In a private palace office, Charles read the same ruling twice, removed his glasses, and whispered that Philip had trusted them to keep certain things buried. Then the court clerk delivered the final blow. One file had been copied, renamed, and stored under a title connected directly to Anne. Anne believed the worst wound was the theft of her father's privacy, but she had not yet learned why one of Philip's forbidden files carried her own name. The ruling placed 3 people at the center of a collision none of them could escape. Anne saw a final promise to her father broken. Meghan faced the accusation that she had crossed a boundary drawn before she entered royal life. Charles stood between them, carrying the burden of a son who knew Philip's temper, a king who feared scandal, and a brother watching his sister struggle not to fall apart. Anne carried more than grief. Her father had trusted her with transferring papers never meant to enter the royal archive, the central collection where royal records are preserved. It mattered because those papers held his unfiltered judgments, not statements prepared for history. They were his voice without polish, and she believed only he had the right to decide when that voice should be heard. Meghan's connection to the files began as Sussex household records were separated from palace systems after she and Harry stepped back from frontline royal duties. Frontline duties are the public engagements and responsibilities performed for the monarch. The process moved correspondence, personal notes, and administrative material through several hands, creating an opening through which papers could disappear without alarm. Meghan sat with her lawyer in a consultation room and insisted she had never kept the documents to injure the family. Her voice stayed controlled, but her hands locked together as the ruling reduced her motives to betrayal. When counsel asked what she believed she was protecting, she looked away and refused to answer. That silence deepened suspicion because it suggested the files held more than private embarrassment. Charles met Anne without advisors. He asked whether she could endure the next hearing, and she answered that endurance was not the same as forgiveness. His sister was not merely mourning stolen papers. She was mourning control over how Philip would be remembered. William received a court summary confirming that the copied file bearing Anne's name contained Philip's assessment of a family crisis. It named who should intervene if trust inside the monarchy collapsed. A second file was tied to correspondence from Meghan's final months as a working royal, suggesting it may have been acquired before household separation began. Anne opened Philip's archive checklist and reached item 17. She pressed one finger against the blank space where his signature should have been verified. Then a retired equerry, a royal attendant who serves a senior family member, agreed to testify about the night the files vanished and the conversation that made Philip seal them. To understand why those papers became dangerous, the court would have to return to the evening when Philip decided that one private conversation could never be allowed to leave Windsor. The missing files had not been created by routine palace paperwork. They were born from a night of anger. Months before Philip's death, a private family discussion at Windsor had turned into a confrontation over loyalty, public accusation, and the monarchy's instinct to protect itself. Nothing was recorded officially. Yet before dawn, the Duke had dictated a series of notes, sealed them separately, and ordered that no household, not Charles's, not William's, and not the Sussexes, should possess copies. Philip entered that late-night meeting exhausted, but he refused to avoid it. The disagreement had moved beyond wounded feelings. It now threatened the family's ability to separate pain from constitutional responsibility, meaning the duty to protect the crown's public role above personal conflict. Meghan challenged that instinct directly. She asked whether the institution had the right to suppress private testimony because it embarrassed senior royals. Philip closed the folder before him. The movement ended the discussion with chilling finality. He told Meghan that pain deserved to be heard, but it did not grant anyone ownership of another person's secrets. She held his gaze, and the silence between them hardened into a warning neither side was willing to soften. Anne followed her father into the corridor and told him he looked exhausted. He answered that exhaustion was survivable, but the collapse of trust was not. Charles later tried to calm him, arguing that the younger generation felt ignored and cornered. The Duke rejected the defense. He told his son that being wounded might explain a decision, but it could never excuse taking control of someone else's private truth. Before sunrise, Philip dictated 12 memoranda, written records preserving his account, judgment, and instructions. They described the meeting, assessed each participant, and set rules for any future breach of confidence. One file carried Anne's name because he wanted his daughter, not the sovereign and not palace communications officers, to decide whether it should ever be opened. Philip handed the sealed envelope to his equerry, the trusted royal attendant responsible for personal duties, and tapped it twice with one finger. No duplicate was ever to exist. Restricted custody meant the papers could be accessed only by authorized hands. Anne remembered the next morning. Her father refused breakfast and sat alone near the window, saying nothing. She now understood that his silence had been the birth of the forbidden archive. Then the retired equerry's documented testimony revealed that Meghan later confronted Anne about those sealed papers, and their exchange ended with a warning neither woman forgot. The files had been sealed because trust had failed once, but the confrontation between Anne and Meghan would prove that the fracture was far deeper than Philip had feared. The recovery of Philip's files was not triggered by a dramatic confession or a palace leak. It began with Sophie. While others argued over public statements and family reputations, the Duchess noticed that the archive catalog contained a sequence of missing authentication marks. She said nothing for weeks. Then, without informing Charles, she requested an independent comparison of the Windsor records. That restrained decision placed the forbidden papers within reach of the court and placed Sophie between Anne and the king. Sophie entered the matter while helping Anne review memorial records connected to Philip's patronages, military affiliations, and private family correspondence. Patronages are causes or organizations publicly supported by a royal figure. The work mattered because those records shaped how his service would be preserved, and one missing signature could alter who controlled sensitive material after his death. Sophie noticed that several entries appeared complete on the palace system, yet the physical verification pages carried no signatures from authorized custodians. Charles's private secretary warned her against an external review. He feared legal exposure, renewed conflict over the Sussex departure, and headlines suggesting the king had lost control of his own records. Sophie refused to let embarrassment outweigh Philip's written restrictions. She believed rules created to protect his privacy meant nothing if the palace could ignore them whenever truth became inconvenient. Before signing the search request, she sat alone with the document for nearly an hour. Edward entered, saw her hesitation, and quietly said that loyalty sometimes meant refusing to protect a comfortable lie. Sophie signed the order, set down the pen, and asked that Anne not be told until evidence existed. Her voice broke, because uncertainty still allowed hope, while proof might wound the princess beyond repair. Edward remained beside her, understanding that his wife had just placed herself between his sister and the monarch. The independent review traced a renamed digital inventory to a former shared administrative system used while Sussex records were being separated. A confidential access log, meaning a protected record of who entered or altered a system, showed that one palace official had noticed the irregularity years earlier. That inquiry was closed after a direct verbal instruction from a senior household office. Charles received the court's demand for the identity behind that order. He read the sealed log once, then again, as the meaning settled over him. Someone within his own circle had protected the concealment. The office named on the final page was close enough to threaten his authority and personal trust. Anne would learn how deeply it reached. The files had crossed one forbidden boundary, but the order that buried the first warning led directly into the king's own household. Charles received the access log shortly after sunrise. He expected to find the signature of a junior official, someone distant enough to dismiss as careless. Instead, the authorization code belonged to his own household's legal coordination office. The king read the entry, turned the page, and then returned to the same line. No one in the room moved. The scandal was no longer only about files Meghan had hidden. Someone near Charles had helped the silence survive. Charles read beyond the code. The access log, a record showing who opened, altered, or closed an official file, revealed that an archivist had flagged the missing authentication pages 18 months after Philip's death. The warning had reached the royal household before the court became involved, yet someone marked it resolved without further action, even though no papers had been recovered. The betrayal cut deeper, because the suppression had been justified as protection for Charles's early reign. A new reign depends on confidence and discipline, so another family crisis was treated as a threat to stability. But the king understood the price. His household had protected the appearance of calm by ignoring his father's written wishes. Anne entered without greeting him. Charles dismissed every advisor, closed the door, and pushed the red folder across the desk. A red folder carries formal government or royal papers requiring senior attention. He admitted that he had not known about the order, then added that ignorance did not absolve him. Anne left the folder untouched. She told her brother that Philip had predicted this failure. Fear of scandal would become stronger than duty. Their father's trust had been sacrificed so the institution could appear controlled, and the princess could barely hide her disgust. The partial summary made the humiliation worse. A senior advisor had closed the inquiry because recovering the files might expose Philip's assessment of Charles's leadership during the family rupture. The Duke had warned that his son's instinct for reconciliation could become dangerous when it repeatedly replaced firm boundaries. Charles suspended the official responsible, ordered an independent audit of every restricted family record, and withdrew palace opposition to the court's full recovery order. In California, Meghan read the documented notice, closed her laptop, and told Harry that the palace had admitted the concealment was larger than one person. Harry answered that admission would not erase what she had done. Anne now held enough evidence to condemn both sides. Yet William asked to meet her alone, carrying no legal argument and no defense. Anne had every reason to demand punishment, yet the person who changed her course did not speak as an heir. He spoke as a grandson who remembered Philip differently. Charles received the access log shortly after sunrise. He expected to find the signature of a junior official, someone distant enough to dismiss as careless. Instead, the authorization code belonged to his own household's legal coordination office. The king read the entry, turned the page, and then returned to the same line. No one in the room moved. The scandal was no longer only about files Meghan had hidden. Someone near Charles had helped the silence survive. Charles read beyond the code. The access log, a record showing who opened, altered, or closed an official file, revealed that an archivist had flagged the missing authentication pages 18 months after Philip's death. The warning had reached the royal household before the court became involved. Yet someone marked it resolved without further action, even though no papers had been recovered. The betrayal cut deeper because the suppression had been justified as protection for Charles's early reign. A new reign depends on confidence and discipline, so another family crisis was treated as a threat to stability. But the king understood the price. His household had protected the appearance of calm by ignoring his father's written wishes. Anne entered without greeting him. Charles dismissed every advisor, closed the door, and pushed the red folder across the desk. A red folder carries formal government or royal papers requiring senior attention. He admitted that he had not known about the order, then added that ignorance did not absolve him. Anne left the folder untouched. She told her brother that Philip had predicted this failure. Fear of scandal would become stronger than duty. Their father's trust had been sacrificed, so the institution could appear controlled, and the princess could barely hide her disgust. The partial summary made the humiliation worse. A senior advisor had closed the inquiry because recovering the files might expose Philip's assessment of Charles's leadership during the family rupture. The Duke had warned that his son's instinct for reconciliation could become dangerous when it repeatedly replaced firm boundaries. Charles suspended the official responsible, ordered an independent audit of every restricted family record, and withdrew palace opposition to the court's full recovery order. In California, Meghan read the documented notice, closed her laptop, and told Harry that the palace had admitted the concealment was larger than one person. Harry answered that admission would not erase what she had done. Anne now held enough evidence to condemn both sides. Yet William asked to meet her alone, carrying no legal argument and no defense. Anne had every reason to demand punishment. Yet the person who changed her course did not speak as an heir. He spoke as a grandson who remembered Philip differently. William found Anne alone after the court adjourned, standing beside a window with Philip's fountain pen still in her hand. There were no lawyers, courtiers, or advisors between them. The prince did not defend Meghan, and he did not excuse the household that buried the warning. Instead, he asked his aunt one painful question. If Philip were present, would he want his private anger used to destroy the family, or would he demand that the breach end without creating another generation of vengeance? William had read the recovered summary. It showed that Philip's forbidden files criticized nearly every major figure caught in the family rupture, including those who believed they were acting from loyalty. A recovered summary is an official account of material restored after being missing or withheld. The future king understood why that mattered. Once private judgments entered public debate, each side would seize the lines that wounded its enemies and ignore the warnings aimed at itself. Anne turned on him. She accused her nephew of asking her to protect Meghan after the Duchess had violated Philip's final boundary. William refused the charge. He said he was asking her to protect his grandfather from becoming a public voice he had never consented to become. The prince admitted he was angry with Meghan, and equally furious that Charles's household had buried the first warning. But anger, he said, could not decide the final meaning of Philip's life. Anne asked whether he had forgiven Harry. William answered no. Then he added that forgiveness and restraint were different choices. He could refuse revenge without pretending the damage had vanished, and his aunt could demand accountability without turning grief into ammunition. For Anne, that distinction mattered because justice could restore a boundary, while exposure would deepen the wound Philip feared. William took the fountain pen from Anne's open palm, closed its cap, and returned it. He reminded her that Philip had trusted her because she could choose duty when punishment felt easier. The princess then revealed what the court summary had not. The file bearing her name gave her authority to destroy Philip's most personal assessment if preserving it no longer served the crown, the monarchy as a continuing public institution. Anne also disclosed that the documents contained no secret plan to remove anyone from the family. Their real danger was harsher. Philip had written that every side helped destroy trust. Anne chose recovery without spectacle. Every copy would be surrendered, but the private judgments would remain sealed. Yet outside, the world already expected a royal bombshell. Anne had chosen restraint inside the court, but outside its walls, one newspaper image transformed private grief into a global judgment. By midday, the legal language had vanished beneath a single photograph. Anne was captured leaving the courthouse with her head lowered, Philip's pen held tightly against her coat. The next morning, one newspaper placed the image across its front page beneath 4 words, "Her father's trust broken." Crowds gathered near Buckingham Palace, broadcasters interrupted regular programming, and a private family wound became a public test of who had betrayed whom, and who still possessed the courage to stop it. The coverage split immediately. One side cast Meghan as the central offender. Another blamed the palace for ignoring warning signs. A third focused on Anne, the daughter left to carry the emotional cost. That division mattered, because the scandal was no longer only about hidden papers. It had become a judgment on whether the monarchy protected truth or merely protected itself. Charles received a statement from palace communications officials, the team responsible for explaining royal decisions publicly. He read it once, then withdrew it, after Anne insisted that the crown acknowledge both the concealment and its failure to investigate. The king knew silence would look like evasion. Outside Buckingham Palace, a woman stepped through the crowd and placed flowers beneath the gates. Beside them, she left a handwritten card, for Anne, and for every daughter protecting her father's dignity. Hours later, a national broadcaster opened its evening report with the empty archive shelf, before cutting to the princess's courthouse photograph. The report framed the crisis as a battle between privacy, accountability, and royal self-preservation. Meghan watched with Harry and faltered when commentators suggested she had intended to exploit Philip's death. She told him that whatever fear had driven her, keeping the files had created the damage she claimed to prevent. Harry did not comfort her with denial. He said the truth would matter only if every copy was returned. Anne saw the front page at breakfast, folded it once, and placed it face down. She told Sophie that sympathy felt unbearable, while the public still knew only fragments. The trusted confidant reminded her that restraint meant nothing unless the facts were acknowledged. Then the court issued a documented announcement. Meghan had identified the overseas custodian and agreed to surrender every copy under judicial supervision, meaning the transfer would be controlled and verified by the court. Charles authorized a public admission that his household had improperly closed the first archive inquiry. Anne approved a statement confirming Philip's restrictions were violated, while protecting his private judgments from publication. Only one decision remained: punishment or closure in her father's name. The world expected Anne to demand retribution, but her final words would define whether Philip's legacy ended in vengeance or discipline. Anne returned to court, carrying the same pen she had placed down when the ruling first shattered her composure. This time, her hand did not tremble. Every missing original had been recovered. Every known duplicate had been surrendered. The palace had admitted its failure, and Meghan had accepted responsibility for keeping what was never hers to retain. Yet the final decision belonged to the daughter Philip trusted most, and Anne refused to let his last private words become an instrument of revenge. The court confirmed that all 12 restricted files, including the overseas duplicate and renamed digital inventory, had returned to protected royal custody. Protected custody means records are secured under strict access rules and cannot be handled without formal permission. Meghan then signed a binding undertaking, a legal promise enforced by the court, banning further possession, distribution, quotation, or commercial use of Philip's material. Meghan acknowledged through her counsel that fear of being silenced had pushed her across a boundary she had no right to cross. She accepted that self-protection did not erase the harm caused to people who had never agreed to carry that burden. Charles faced his own reckoning. The king accepted the resignation of the advisor, who suppressed the first inquiry, and ordered permanent independent oversight of restricted family archives. Anne addressed the court with controlled force. She said her father believed duty demanded clarity, but he never confused clarity with cruelty. The princess asked for enforcement, recovery, and accountability, not humiliation. Then she opened the file bearing her name, removed Philip's final assessment, and placed it inside a destruction envelope authorized by the court. Anne sealed the envelope herself and signed across the flap. A surviving administrative note explained why Philip had trusted her with that power. She would know when preserving truth protected the monarchy, and when preserving anger would poison it. The assessment was destroyed. The records of concealment, palace suppression, recovery, and reform remained permanently preserved as a warning. Charles met Anne afterward without aids. He apologized for the failure committed under his household. She offered no easy absolution, but accepted his promise that Philip's restrictions would never again be treated as optional. William waited outside. Anne handed him the capped pen and said their grandfather's memory belonged to the family again, not to the dispute. Restraint defeated revenge at last. There was nothing left to conceal, nothing left to release, and nothing left for Anne to prove. Philip's files were closed, his dignity was restored, and the family finally understood the price of betraying trust. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.